The heaviest snowstorm of 1894 did not stop the music spilling from the windows of the Harrington estate, nor did it stop the rhythmic, punishing sound of Elias chopping wood in the dark. For 15 years, the quiet farmhand had lived in the shadow of the great house, his hands calloused from maintaining a legacy that was not his. Tonight, the golden light bleeding onto the snow felt colder than the wind. Inside, Arthur Harrington was preparing to hand his daughter, Clara, to a man she did not love, all to save a farm that was quietly dying. Elias swung the heavy iron axe. The wood splintered. He didn't look up at the grand dining room window, though he could feel her standing there. Clara. She had spent the last 10 years finding excuses to visit the stables, bringing him hot coffee in chipped porcelain mugs, lingering in the quiet spaces between her father's expectations and Elias's silence. But coffee and lingering glances could not pay the crippling debts Arthur Harrington had hidden from the town. Harrison Vance could. Vance was a railroad investor with deep pockets, a cruel laugh, and a demand for a trophy wife. Elias buried the axe into the chopping block and left it there. He pulled his thin wool collar up against the biting wind. He was leaving by dawn. He had already packed his only 2 possessions, a worn canvas coat and a broken silver pocket, watch his father had left him before dying in poverty. He could endure the freezing cold, the endless labor, and the dismissive stares of the wealthy men in town. But he could not stay and watch Clara walk down the aisle toward a man who looked at her the way he looked at a newly purchased horse. Inside the manor, the engagement dinner was suffocating. Clara sat perfectly still in a dark velvet dress that felt more like armor than silk. Across from her, Harrison Vance swirled a glass of expensive brandy. "The snow is burying the roads," Vance said, his voice carrying the lazy drawl of a man who had never shoveled a path in his life. "Your men had better clear the path before my carriage departs, Arthur. I won't have my horses struggling in the drift." "Of course," Arthur said. The older man's voice lacked its usual booming authority. His posture was hollowed out. He was selling his daughter to keep his pride, and the shame of it aged his face by a decade. Clara looked away from Vance, her eyes drifting back to the frosted glass of the window. The yard was empty now. The axe was still in the block, slowly being buried by the falling snow. Her chest tightened. "I thought you'd at least try to," she whispered to herself. She stopped. She already knew. Elias was too honorable to ruin her family's only chance at survival. The heavy wind rattled the window panes, masking the sound at first. But then it came again, a dull rhythmic thumping at the heavy oak doors of the manor. Arthur frowned, signaling to one of the nervous housemaids. The maid pulled open the heavy doors. The wind howled into the grand foyer, extinguishing the nearest candles in a sudden breath of winter. The maid gasped, stepping back. There was no carriage, no late-arriving guest. On the snow-covered stone porch, perfectly centered under the flickering glow of the carriage light, sat a woven wicker basket. Inside, wrapped in a thick, ice-crusted wool blanket. "A baby was crying Dot before we continue. If you believe that kindness has no rank and grace wears no uniform, please like this video, subscribe to Cursed Lights, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people." Again today, Elias had been halfway to the stables when he heard the heavy doors open. By the time he reached the porch, Arthur, Vance, and Clara were already standing in the foyer. The housemaid had carried the basket inside, placing it on the polished mahogany table. "What is the meaning of this?" Vance demanded, brushing a snowflake from his tailored suit in disgust. "Some vagrant leaves their mistake at your door, Arthur? Have your man take it to the church orphanage immediately." Elias stepped into the doorway, brushing the snow from his boots. He didn't look at Vance. He looked at Clara. She was already reaching into the basket, her hands trembling as she pulled the blanket back from the infant's red, tear-streaked face. "The child is freezing," Clara said, lifting the baby against her chest. Her velvet dress instantly caught the dampness of the snow, but she didn't care. "We are not sending a baby back out into a blizzard." "Clara," Arthur warned, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Mr. Vance is right. This isn't our responsibility." Elias stepped forward. His shadow fell over the mahogany table. As Clara lifted the child, Elias saw something resting at the bottom of the woven basket. It was a thick oilcloth envelope, sealed with hardened black wax dot. Without asking for permission, Elias reached out with his rough, weather-cracked hands and picked it up. The envelope was heavy. Written on the front in an elegant, trembling script was a single name, Elias Thorne. The foyer went completely silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace. Arthur Harrington's face drained of all color. He stared at the envelope in Elias's hand as if the farmhand had just pulled a ghost from the basket. "Give that to me," Arthur said. His voice cracked. It was not a command. It was a plea. Elias looked at the older man. For 15 years, Elias had kept his head down. He had taken his wages in quiet gratitude. But the pure, undisguised terror in Arthur Harrington's eyes told Elias that his entire life of submission had been built on a lie. Elias didn't hand the envelope over. He broke the black wax seal. With his thumb dot inside was a fragile, yellowed document, and a smaller letter written by the town's former doctor, a man who had died 3 days ago. Elias recognized the doctor's handwriting. He read the first few lines in silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to slow down. Elias's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the faded ink of the older document beneath the doctor's note. Dot. It was a land deed. Dated 28 years ago. Dot. It was signed by Elias's father, turning over the entire Harrington estate, the valley, and the timber mills, not to Arthur Harrington, but to Elias. Arthur had been a witness, sworn to hold the deed in trust until Elias came of age, because Elias's father had been dying of consumption and owed debts he feared would consume the land. Instead, Arthur had buried the deed. He had let Elias grow up in the freezing stables, working as a servant on the very land he owned, while Arthur built a fragile empire on stolen dirt. The doctor, burdened by guilt in his final hours, had given the truth to his housekeeper to deliver. The woman had not survived the trek through the storm, but she had managed to leave her own orphaned grandchild and the truth at the only door that mattered. "What does it say, boy?" Vance snapped, stepping forward. "If it's a demand for money, throw it in the fire." Elias slowly folded the papers. He looked around the grand foyer, the crystal chandelier, the polished floors, the warmth. Everything he had been denied. Everything his father had tried to save for him. He looked at Arthur. The wealthy landowner wasn't standing tall anymore. His shoulders had collapsed. The illusion of his superiority was gone. replaced by the frail reality of a thief waiting for his sentence. "Elias," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling. "Please." Harrison Vance scoffed, stepping between them. "I don't know what kind of theatrical nonsense this is, but I will not have my evening ruined by a stable boy. Arthur haven't thrown out, or our arrangement is finished. I won't marry into a family that lets the help dictate the mood." Elias finally looked at Vance. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The arrangement is finished," Elias said quietly. Vance let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Excuse me?" Elias stepped past Vance as if the millionaire did not exist. He walked toward Clara, who was still holding the sleeping baby against her chest. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching his weathered face. She had always known he was stronger than the men who gave him orders. She just hadn't known how strong until this exact moment. Elias reached into his heavy canvas coat. He pulled out the broken silver pocket, watch his father had left him. He placed it gently on the mahogany table next to the basket. Then he looked at Arthur. Elias could take it all. With one trip to the magistrate in the morning, Arthur Harrington would be ruined. He would face prison. He would lose the house, his reputation, and his dignity. The revenge would be absolute. It would be justified. Elias held the yellowed deed over the flickering candles on the side table. Arthur gasped, taking a step forward. "My father trusted you to protect his family," Elias said, his voice carrying the low, steady weight of a man who knew exactly who he was. "You chose to protect yourself." Elias lowered the corner of the deed into the candle's flame. The dry, aged paper caught instantly. Bright orange fire crawled up the edges, illuminating Elias's calm face as the document that proved his wealth turned to ash. In his fingers, Clara let out a small breath, tears spilling over her eyelashes. "What are you doing?" Vance demanded, stepping forward, suddenly realizing that whatever power was in that room, he held none of it. Elias dropped the burning remnants onto the stone hearth. He watched it turn black. "I don't need a piece of paper to tell me what I'm worth," Elias said, turning back to Arthur. "But you do. Keep the house, Arthur. Keep the land. The debt is paid." Arthur Harrington fell to his knees. The heavy thud echoed against the hardwood floor. He didn't weep loudly. He just lowered his head, his hands shaking as they pressed against his face. The man who had everything was kneeling before the man who had nothing, destroyed not by vengeance, but by an act of grace he knew he did not deserve. Elias turned to Vance. "Your carriage is waiting," Elias said. "The path is clear enough for you to leave. Do not come back." Vance opened his mouth to speak, to threaten, to demand his rights. But he looked at Elias's eyes, and for the first time in his wealthy, sheltered life, Harrison Vance recognized a man who could not be bought, broken, or intimidated. Vance adjusted his coat, his face flushed with humiliated rage, and walked out into the storm without a word. The heavy doors clicked shut. The foyer was quiet again. Elias looked at Clara. She was still holding the infant. She didn't look like a prisoner in a velvet dress anymore. She looked exactly like the woman who had brought him coffee in the freezing mornings, the woman who had seen the man beneath the dirt for 10 years. "I packed my things," Elias said quietly. "I'm leaving in the morning." Clara stepped toward him. She didn't ask for permission from her father, who was still kneeling by the hearth. She stopped inches from Elias. "The roads are buried," she whispered, looking up into his eyes. "They'll clear," he said, though he made no move to step away. "I don't want them to," she said. She reached out with her free hand and gently touched the rough fabric of his coat. It was the first time she had ever touched him without the barrier of a coffee mug or a horse's reins between them. Elias closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, the years of silent endurance finally breaking against the warmth of her hand. By morning, the storm had passed. The Harrington estate was covered in a blinding, pure white blanket of snow. The heavy carriage tracks from the night before were completely erased, as if Harrison Vance had never existed. Inside the manor, the grand dining room was empty. But in the kitchen, seated at the small wooden table, Arthur Harrington was quietly feeding a bottle of warm milk to an orphaned baby. He looked older, tired, but the heavy shadow of his pride was gone. Outside, the porch light was finally turned off. The axe was pulled from the chopping block, not by a servant, but by a man clearing a path for the woman walking beside him. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Cursed Lights for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, what is the hardest thing you have ever had to forgive?